Alright, so we're looking at fading moves past ATR today. And just quickly before we start, I want to show you what I use to get this data. So firstly, I'm downloading data directly from my broker here. And then what I'm doing is I'm using this tool that I've made with C# to, depending on the method you select, it processes that data and then creates an output file, which is what you're seeing here. So I did have many more methods, by the way, but I've just cleaned it up and I've made basically a new program just for this series. So anyway, with that being said, let's take a look at the data, right? So firstly, let's see what we are actually looking at, right? So with my thing, you can kind of select different ATR extensions. So you've got extension 0, that's just ATR. Extension 1, that's one standard deviation past the ATR. And then extension 2, I've put as 2 standard deviations past the ATR. Obviously, you can put in different figures, but that's what we've looked at here. And we'll talk about this in a second. And basically, the idea with this is that people will say that if a market is past ATR, that's when people start to take profits, right? So the idea is that once you're past ATR, you will see a reaction, right, and a pullback. So basically that's what we're testing here. So many people will say that it happens exactly at the ATR, but I also want to test what happens at more extreme ATR values. So let's take a look at the data here. So this is using 20 period EMA, which again we can change that value, but that's what we've used. So the first data set here is using no stop at all, right? So that's an option that I've put in my my backtester thing here. So let's take a look at that. So ATR 0 or just the ATR. This is what it looks like. So we're just entering at the ATR value. And the way I've set it up this time is that in order to get filled on the entry or the exit, it has to tick one tick beyond your entry price. So this should be a good reflection of real market conditions. I haven't factored in commission. And to be fair, I've assumed that we get filled at the closing price when there's no stop. So that is something to take into consideration. But anyway, let's look at the data. So just at the ATR, that's what it looks like here. One standard deviation past ATR looks like this. And then 2 standard deviations past ATR looks like this. So this looks considerably better than either of these two. And then I thought, okay, well, this might not be the best way to test it, right? Because if we are expecting profit taking around the ATR, you wouldn't necessarily expect this to last until the close, right? It might just be a small bounce and then it continues trending in whatever direction it was before. So then I thought, okay, let's try using a 0.5 ATR stop and the 0.25 ATR take profit. Now, one thing you can select is you can use standard deviations instead of ATR. I haven't got any results for that right now, but that's one thing I programmed in. So, there's different parameters that we can use. I've done these 2 here just as an example, but I might play around with it a bit more. So anyway, right on the ATR, that's what it looks like there. And just as a comparison, that's what it looks like holding it to the close. And that is with a 0.5 ATR stop and a 0.25 ATR target. So it looks a bit worse on that one. ATR 1 doesn't look much better. And then ATR 2 still looks pretty good, but if we actually hold it to the close, it does look quite a bit better. Okay, so what about a 0.2 ATR stop and a 0.2 ATR target? So that's 1-to-1 reward to risk. And these are the results. So it's pretty much the same across the board from what I've tested. Basically, the only thing that I think is interesting here is fading 2 standard deviations past the ATR. So you can see all of these look pretty good. And if you look at the number of trades, you've got about 200 examples. And you can see that it goes up about 1,600 ticks here. So to me, that seems like a pretty decent edge. And I think of all the things that we've tested thus far, this is the thing that shows the clearest edge. However, one thing to point out is that obviously this is over a long period of time. We go back to 2012, and you can see that if you look at the graph here, there are periods where the graph does look pretty flat. So, you know, over time, this does seem to have quite a strong edge, but you know, if you're using this for day trading, firstly, it doesn't happen very often. So if we look at 2025, we can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So 14 examples across the whole trading year. So not a very large amount. And we can go back to the table here and we can see that it's about 6% of days that will hit the second standard deviation of ATR. So it's not a very likely occurrence, but when it does happen, it does seem to give a decent edge there. So we've come to the end of the main 3 things I wanted to test in terms of basically fading a move that is extending the day's current range. And I think the next stage here is to look at a specific setup that is fading the expansion on the day, and then basically use these things as a filter, because that will give a better representation of what you would do under real trading conditions. You know, it's all very well looking at statistics and looking at trying to get an edge out of these things, but applying it to real specific trades is the only way to demonstrate that this is actually something that you want to be looking at in your trading, right? So I'm not sure if that's going to go on the channel or not, but we're going to see about that one. One other thing that this does give me an idea for is we're looking at ATRs here on the daily time frame, right? So we're looking at extensions past daily ATR. But what we could do is we could break down each hour into its own kind of ATR, you know, comparing the previous, not the previous hour, but the previous day's range. So in other words, like 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. And you compare that today, the previous day, the day before that, and so on. So you kind of get a figure that is the standard, and then you look for deviations outside of that. And I would imagine that would give you a lot more potential setups. And the hypothesis would be that if we are trading quite a way past ATR on a given hour, we might be able to fade it more short term and look for a reaction there. So that might be something that we test on the channel, or it might be something that I test on my own. But I am going to be testing more things on BUND. I am going to be looking at potential daily biases and that sort of thing. So stay tuned.